Perfect. I'm showing 12 o'clock on my clock here. We're going to get started with our Texas Master Naturalist Be the Change webinar series event for June. We have Judge Ronnie McDonald joining us today. We're so excited to hear and have conversations with the judge. So thank you for joining us. Before we get officially started with our event, we always like to run through a short tech check for all of our attendees and make sure that you guys have all of the resources and tools that are available on WebEx enabled, and you are able to hear us and you're able to interact with us and the rest of the attendees today. So as we get started, as always, just a reminder, as an attendee, you cannot unmute or show your video. We have a number of attendees joining us today, and we don't want to be a screen of talking birds and talking heads. We want to be able to give Ronnie the attention for the conversation that he's going to share with us today. So again, don't worry that you cannot unmute or you cannot share your video. That is on purpose. I love this GIF. It's my favorite. If you are seeing me change the screens and you are seeing my mouth move but you can't hear me, you want to make sure that your audio volume is turned all the way up. You can do that by taking a picture of this screen real fast with the instructions on going to audio settings, going to the speaker and selecting your output volume. Another common issue that we have is folks making sure that they've got everything plugged in. So make sure that everything's plugged in. You can't hear me if you're not plugged in right now, but it should be on the screen so that you can toggle that audio for you. And I'll wait here just another second to make sure everybody's got audio today. All right, and then finally we have a help desk phone number and website that you can go to if you're still having issues with WebEx. Hopefully you've been able to join us for previous webinar series events and you have all of your WebEx kinks worked out and you're an expert at WebEx now and you don't need these resources. But again, we always want to share these links and phone numbers so that you can use them if needed or if you're new to our series. We're going to use both the chat function and the Q&A function. This is different for our seminar series, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this today. Our chat tool, and Michelle, I'm going to ask you to say howdy in the chat. Our chat tool is going to be for having discussions, asking questions to the common group, for opening group conversation questions. This is where we're going to have some of that discussion back and forth as Ronnie's posing those difficult questions and asking for some feedback. We're going to again ask for clear and full sentences, professional and respectful comments in the chat as well. And to make sure that we are having that group conversation, select to everyone in your chat so that we can all have that group conversation together. And then
just to note, the to everyone isn't at the top of the list. You have to scroll down maybe 4 or 5 in the list. So look for the to everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the Q&A tool we're going to use today to collect any questions that you may have that you want us to kind of save and hold on to and they don't get lost in chat. Kind of save those questions for that moderated Q&A discussion time at the end when Ronnie asks what kind of questions have come out for the end of the discussion. That again, using that Q&A tool helps us to hold those, save those, put them to the side so that we can come back to them. We don't lose them in the litany of chat that may come in. So you'll ask your questions to all panelists so that all of our panelists today are able to see those questions and we can help to get those questions to Ronnie during the appropriate time. Again, as always, full and clear sentences. Try not to use acronyms so that we can understand what your question is and get you the answer that you deserve. And then finally, before we launch into Ronnie's presentation today and discussion, I just wanted to run through our webinar etiquette one last time, as we always like to do. Again, attendees are not able to unmute. Please use the chat room for discussion, Q&A for questions. Our chat and our Q&A function are both on to facilitate that on-topic discussion. Again, professional and respectful. full sentences so that we can help to understand what your discussion point is. We will run for 1 hour. Michelle has started the recording on today's webinar, and we will post that to our website later today, if not tomorrow morning. And then finally, there are more resources on our website for WebEx help if you still need some help with WebEx. There it goes. I think I skipped through just a little bit. Michelle, do you want to talk about the Master Naturalist Program?
Sure. So if you're attending our Be the Change series and you're new to the Master Naturalist Program and you have further questions, or you're interested in joining us, you're always welcome to join us. Our mission for the Master Naturalist Program is to develop a core of well-educated master volunteers who perform outreach, education, and service dedicated towards the beneficial management of natural resources and natural areas within their local communities for the state of Texas. We're sponsored both by Texas Parks and Wildlife and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension at the state level. And we hold trainings all throughout the year for new volunteers in the program. We recommend that you locate the chapter nearest you, learn about their application process, when their next training dates are, and apply to become involved. And then here's an overview of becoming a Master Naturalist. So find your chapter, find your training dates, apply, pay your dues or training costs, and have fun. Join us. Anyone's welcome. This offering that we have today is part of our TMN Tuesdays and Be the Change series. Today is our Be the Change series offered on Tuesdays, this Tuesday of the month. And then just a reminder, our upcoming July TMN Tuesday events and Be the Change events, July 13th is our TMN Tuesday event. And that will focus on advanced training for the program. And then July 20th, which is the third Tuesday of every month, is our next Be the Change series webinar. So you're welcome to join us anytime for those as well. We are recording today's event. It will be available on our website by tomorrow or tomorrow morning. So Master Naturalist attending live today or viewing the recording afterwards can count this as advanced training, up to 1 hour of advanced training for their advanced training component of the program. Today, I'm so honored to introduce and welcome former Judge Ronnie McDonald from Bastrop. You're in for a treat today with a dynamic speaker. Ronnie came and spoke to another group that I work with, and his presentation was spot on, dynamic, and it was just left me with the idea that we have to have him for our Master Naturalist program. So you're in for a treat. Ronnie McDonald served as the Bastrop County Judge during a time in which the population of the county doubled. So homeboy here in Texas, served in Texas, and still lives in Bastrop County. He was elected at age 27, becoming one of the youngest to ever serve as a county judge in the state of Texas. And he was the first African American to be elected countywide in Bastrop County as well. He also became the first African American elected in Texas out of 254 counties. In his time as the county judge in Bastrop, he oversaw a $31 million county budget and managed emergency of flood and fire, including the largest fire of Texas history. He worked across party lines to save lives and promote recovery. Prior to being elected, Judge McDonald served in the State Comptroller's Office as an Assistant Executive Director for Family Pathfinders. And after retiring from judgeship, he was the Government Relations and Education Liaison for the firm McCurry, Veselka, Bragg, and Allen in Round Rock. Most recently, Judge McDonald served as Executive Director for Strategic Partnerships and Community Relations at Texas A&M University, working with the directors of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Texas A&M Forest Service to provide direction on strategic priorities and focus. So he knows Extension, he knows the sponsors of our program, and he speaks our language. So he served as the primary contact point for other partners in providing updates on a variety of joint interests, such as natural disasters, providing agri-life support to rural communities, and grants and partnership opportunities. Currently, Ronnie serves as a lead pastor at Bold Church in Bastrop, Texas, and a partner of the Rock Group Communications, where he travels the nation training religious community leaders and helping communities map and manage assets for strong economies and strategic growth. Ronnie graduated from Texas A&M in 1993 with a bachelor's degree in political science and business. He has been married to his wife, Ty, for over 24 years, and the couple have 3 children together. Congratulations, Ty and Ronnie. And today I welcome Ronnie McDonald, and he will be talking about Don't Count Me Out, managing relationships, diversity, and inclusion. So Ronnie, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Mary, for having me. I wanted y'all to pay attention. I did the Aggie whoop when they said Aggie, but when she had mentioned my wife, I was like, ah. Now, see, you have to know how to do that, how to bring people in. My wife is in the room with me, so I wanted her to make sure that she was part of this presentation and she was excited about it also. Hey guys, it's a pleasure being with you today. I want you to do something real quick before we start, before I get moving. You don't even have to write this in the comments, but when you see me on stage, when you see me on the screen, looking at me, what are the first words that come to your mind, right? I don't want you to put it on the screen. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want, you can be real honest with yourself on your own sheet of paper. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to do that. Write it down. So when you see me, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? All right. Don't talk about his tie doesn't match or anything like that. But why does he have a bow tie on? None of that. But the first things that come to your mind, do that. Okay. Have you got it? Done? All right. We're going to move on. As Michelle was saying, I grew up in Bastrop. I'm a 5th generation Bastropian. So that means I have a rural background. I understand rural Texas. But when I grew up watching Westerns. How many of you grew up watching Westerns? Do you know what I'm talking about? Thank you. Thank you. I saw the hand raised, grew up watching Westerns, and it was always conquering the frontier. So my dad, my mom, my brother, we would always be in front of the TV and we were watching these Westerns. And one thing that always happened when you were watching the Westerns was there was always an attack coming, right? And then when there was an attack coming and they were conquering the frontier, they had this thing that they did to protect themselves. Do any of you remember what that was? All right. It was called circling the wagons, right? They would circle the wagons up and everybody would get in their little spots and they would circle up and make sure everything was protected. That was frontier life. Everyone was connected. And even once the danger had moved away, when they start building on the frontier, everyone worked together to be able to move forward. And I watched that and I was like glued to the TV and I was like, wow, man, circle the wagon, circle the wagon, circle the wagon. And what was so unique in those TV shows, it was showing how community was formed. Everyone was interested in people progressing. Everyone was included. Everyone that was part of that community said, how can we work together to get something accomplished? And in rural Texas, we kind of know, we've seen that it takes a community to work together. So that was a reality to me, but it also became the thought of circling the wagon. What is your circle? Who is around you? Who are you hanging around with? And I grew up, like I said, in the country, and our circle was very small. But I do remember my parents always being there, telling me, "You're great. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're going to do great things." Heard that over and over and over again. Spent a lot of time with my mom. My mom used to always ride around. She was a Avon salesman. How many of you have ever dealt with Avon? Right? Michelle raises her hand. Because, right now you probably want some Skin So Soft to be able to spray on to keep the mosquitoes out off of you. And they had all these different things. And my mom would always go around and do that. So I rode around with her as she sold Avon. And I watched her sell Avon. And I was like, "Mom, come on, Mom." And she talked to everybody, but that was a part of my circle. Also, a part of my circle was my grandfather. My grandfather was the one that picked me up from school. And what was so cool about this was he would always pick me up on a tractor. And when he picked me up on the tractor, I'm getting off the bus, he pulls up on the tractor, all of the kids are looking at me, and I'm like, I'm so important. And I spent time with him, and he was going out, and he would always pull up. And one of the things about being in the country or being part of rural Texas is you always would talk to people. You would sit down, you would have a conversation, and it would always move forward. Now, my grandfather would always start conversations out like this. Somebody would ask me, "Can you sit a spell?" Right? And they would ask him, could he sit a spell? And then we would go into the conversation. So I grew up in that community, and that community became my circle. They began to define who I was, and I was like, yeah. How many of you have grew up in a circle like that? You understand what I'm saying by a circle? A circle is the people closest to you that define you and give you an identity. And they also give you this feeling of comfort in who you are. That's when you have a good circle. And also when there's a disaster or something pops up, you're like, my circle protects me. My circle tells me who I am. And you can stay in that circle for a long period of time. Some of us in our communities have circles. That means that in this area, I'm comfortable. So if I was talking to Mary and I start talking about Giddings, which is her circle, Mary, you probably can say, yeah, I know so-and-so. Yeah, you could really connect to that. And many of you, you have a circle which you connect with, and you have a circle that kind of defines you. It gives you peace. It's like, yeah. Now, like I said, I grew up watching Westerns. And I watched it all the time, and I was excited. I was the one that was running around with my cowboy hat on, bang, 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 thinking I could save the world. All of those things became real to me in my circle. And it was great. And then I grew up as a child, like I said, with my parents speaking to me, telling me that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. You're going to do great things, all of these different things. I was happy with that. But what happens when you leave your circle? How many of you have left your circle and then all of a sudden things are shook? Now, I'm going to pick on Mary real quick. Now, Mary, I don't know if you were born and raised in Giddings. I'm going to play that, okay? Where?
Florida.
Oh, you messed up my story. So that's all right, though. But Mary, we're good. Because I'm going to mess with you as being someone from Florida moving into somebody else's circle, Giddings. So therefore, it is a unique community. And a lot of times when you leave those communities, there is an adjustment. And I'm sure it was an adjustment coming from Florida to Giddings. It was like, wow. It was something that shook you. Am I right, Mary?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a whole different culture. It's a whole different way of communicating. It's different standards in the circle of how to be in the circle.
And probably what happens, anytime somebody new comes in, you look at them, you evaluate them, they're probably like, who's this Mary? Where's she coming from? Where's this city person coming from? All that. I don't know what part of Florida, but it was like all of that. So there's a point when you leave your circle. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable leaving your circle. Now, I remember leaving my circle and leaving my world in which everything kind of wrapped around my grandfather, my mother. Now I had to go into school. How many of y'all remember going into school? And when you're going into school, you're like, are they going to like me? They don't like me. How are they going to relate to me? I remember this experience because now my circle was changing. People began to tell me, you know what? You're not part of my circle. You're not like me. You don't look like me. You don't talk like me. Now that circle has changed, and you look and you say, can I be part of your circle? And it is real hard to be evaluated. How many of you love evaluation time? It's like, boss, supervisor, it's evaluation time. Tell me how great I am. Some of you may do that, but most of the time when you go to a point of evaluation, you start getting nervous. You start looking at yourself. You start thinking, do I measure up? So a lot of times when we leave our circles of comfort, our circles of definement, we can get kind of insecure, and it makes us see, do I fit? And now it made me look at my circles a little bit closer. I grew up watching Westerns. I watched the Frontier. But you know what they began to tell me? That wasn't designed for you. Do you see anybody in that picture who looks like you, who talks like you? And I'm looking and I'm saying, no, well, that's not you. And I'm like, wait a minute. I love coming together. No, that's not you. I love working together. I love helping out. That's not you. Well, who am I? And that question becomes relevant when you leave your circle. The question is, who am I? Who am I? Now, you've been told all these things in your circle. You've been told how great you are. But now the things that you have been told are being tested. You are leaving a circle. And the thing that we're talking about is being a change agent. How do you be a change agent? Because when you're a change agent, a lot of times you have to leave the things that you're comfortable with. You have to leave your circle. And then it becomes a time of evaluation. How am I? How do I feel about myself? All of these different things. And how we move forward on that is going to determine how we bring about change. Are we going to fit in? Are we going to conform? Or are we going to take it to a whole nother level? And this is a point of development. Like I said, I grew up country. I was around my mom. I was around my dad. I was around my grandfather. All these individuals were pouring into me in my circle, in my comfort zone, where I was comfortable, where I was being defined. That was great at that time, but now I have to leave my circle, and now people are telling me to evaluate what you're looking at different, right? They're pointing out you're not like everybody else. That may not be for you. And now you're saying, do I buy into the holistic view of what I'm seeing, right? Am I buying into this frontier mentality that I don't see anybody like me, nobody's talking like me, and then some people are saying that the circle is formed to keep me out? Now, this is what happens. How do we respond? How do we respond? And now I remember being in that situation. And I think in life, we all come back to moments when we think about when I wasn't in the circle. When I wasn't picked first, I was the last one picked. When somebody did not like me. I liked Stevie, Stevie didn't like me. I liked Sally, Sally didn't like me. How did I feel in that situation? Was I at my best when I wasn't chosen? Was I at my best when I wasn't part of that circle? How did that make you feel? And when we start thinking about that, those experiences began to set up how we look at people and how we look at situations based on your circle, if I was accepted in a circle, what I saw, all these different things. But this is what happens a lot of times. When you are not accepted in a circle, you form your own. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you don't like me? Oh, I don't need you anyway. You think you want me to be part of your circle? I don't need to be part of your circle. I'll form my own circle. I'll find somebody who loves me. And I don't see a problem with finding someone who loves you. It's like, oh, they love me. they accept me. I remember being in the 7th grade. And like I said, my parents had gave me a real great idea of who I was, identity. They told me a whole lot of things when I was young, right? So I went into my 7th grade English class saying, hey, I want to be great. I want to achieve great things. I'm in honors. I want to do all these different things. I had been to my family reunions. They had focused on the importance of education, where you're going to go. They did all those different things. It was in me. But now I'm put in an environment that's saying you are not like us. Because I happen to be the only African American sitting in that room, right? And as I was sitting in that room, and we talked about when you are the last one picked, or when you are not like everybody else, what happens? You feel evaluated. Everybody is looking at me. And now you have to make an assessment. How do I feel about myself? So I remember being in this class, and everybody was reading. We were reading this book called Huckleberry Finn, right? And Huckleberry Finn was a great book, but sometimes they used a word that I wasn't comfortable with. And when that word came up, I was like, wait a minute, are we allowed to use this word in that way? So everyone was reading, and they were reading, point out, only African American in the classroom. They came across a word, and they used the N word, and they said it. And we had some great readers, right? They enunciated, they put emphasis on it, all that. So when they said their word, they said the N word. And when they said the N word, guess what happened? All the attention came to who? Me, the person from Florida. That's me, right? I'm the outsider. I'm the one that doesn't live here. Now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at that, and now I got an evaluation of myself. I'm the one from Florida. I'm the one that's not from Giddings that everybody is looking at, and I talk funny, and they're talking in a different way. So now I'm in a process of being evaluated in that situation, and I'm like, oh no, now guess who time is it? It's my time to read. I'm already feeling pointed out. I'm already feeling like I've been called out. Now my body starts to say, ooh, you're left out. Ooh, they're looking at you. Ooh, it's a point of evaluation. So as I'm reading, my voice, the fear, right? Now I had not been given the spirit of fear, all that my parents had told me, all that stuff, right? But all of a sudden my body starts to say, ooh, they're all looking at you. And my voice began to squeak, right? So since I didn't feel a part of the circle, I didn't feel a part of the team, now all of a sudden my production goes down because I am thinking that I am less than, right? It's not true, but the thought and the environment makes me feel that way. So what comes out of my mouth is less than what I am because I don't feel valued, right? And it's no fault of everybody else. Everybody in Giddings is just living their life, right? They were just living their life. They hadn't made any adjustments for someone in Florida. They were just doing what they do. I'm just sitting in the classroom. Nobody thought to make an adjustment because they haven't asked a person from Florida how they would feel in Giddings. They hadn't asked a person from the outside how they would feel in this English class if the N word was used. So you can get so comfortable saying, hey, everybody in my family likes this. Everybody in my circle likes this. Now, when somebody from outside the circle comes in, now I'm like, ooh, do I really make an adjustment for them? Or do they just need to adjust? Florida, you need to adjust. So all of a sudden, I'm dealing with the thought of how am I going to adjust to this situation? How can I be a change agent? Now, the change agent comes from a change that's inside of myself to say, how do I change this situation? Because what happened is, because of insecurities, because of situations, I wasn't myself. I was less than myself. My voice went out. My reading was terrible. Now, all of a sudden, the situation began to change me rather than me changing the situation, right? Now, this took some time. I had to grow. I had to grow and say, now, How do I build what's in me to be able to change the situation? Like I said, my circle was getting stronger. I had to catch it because I want to talk about this. This is kind of unique. This is what causes divisions in communities. What happens is when you don't feel appreciated, you start your own, you build your own little comfort zone, and you say, this is my bubble, this is my circle, I am not going to leave it, and anybody outside this circle is less than me, right? And that becomes my comfort zone. I'm like, man, we are the Aggies, forget the Longhorns. We are the Red Raiders, forget them. We get our own little circle. We are the Aggies are we. It feels so good, and we're doing all this, but we are the Aggies. But of course, we're inclusive. But you get the point. Once you begin to wrap yourself in your circle, don't go outside of your circle, don't go outside of your neighborhood, don't see anything different, all of a sudden you begin to cause division. And we wonder why there's division, because we are staying in our circles and we're not growing and going to see how we can bring these different things together. Somebody asked, how do I become a change agent? Wow. I spent a little time with my mom, right? My mom, I told you, sold Avon. And she was the best Avon salesman because she just didn't just go sell Avon. She met people. She built relationships. Everywhere she went, she was talking to people. And it wasn't that surface relationship to say, hey, how you doing? She would sit down, have coffee with them, and she would listen to their story. See, Mary was kind of messing with me earlier. She said, hey, Ronnie, I'm right down the street. I'm from Giddings. Yeah, so we had this rain and all that. And what she was doing was she was making me comfortable by saying, here are some things that we have in common. You live in Bastrop, I live in Giddings. We had rain. Did you have rain? And we weren't talking about things that were different. We were saying, here are some common things. Mary wasn't saying, oh, you are the black guy with the tie, this, did that. She came to that thing and says, this is what we have in common. This is what I said, yeah, Mary, all those different things. A great comedian, the reason a comedian is funny, because he creates a situation in which we all are familiar with. And he says, do you remember, I mean, Cosby did this, I'm not going to steal it. He was saying he went to the restroom and he was on the restroom and all of a sudden he ran out of toilet paper. How many people have been there? Okay, thank you, man. Even if you hadn't, just thank you. And he gave the whole scenario about how he had to deal. And nobody wants to admit I've been there, but it built some common ground to be able to say, you know what? I've been there. No matter what color I am, no matter where I come from, I've been there. When I'm on a frontier, we all deal with danger. We're all scared. We've been there. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Hispanic, Puerto Rican. It doesn't matter. You had fear. And how do you deal with fear? You deal with fear by coming together and unifying. So my mom, she was awesome. She would sit there and she would talk to the people. And as she heard their story, right? She heard their story. And as she heard their story, she said, oh, I can relate to the story. And then she says, guess what? You know, that mosquito's been biting you. Guess what? I have some skin so soft for that. Boom. So she listened to him, heard the story, and then said, oh, I got something that can help you. But the most important thing that she did was build a relationship. And then she built trust. And now she can say, I'm bringing something that can help you. It wasn't the point of, I got to sell this Avon, I'm trying to make some money. It was like, I have something that can help you. And so she listened to their story. She understood their situation. And then the product that she had helped them. Isn't that good? Right? So when we're in service, when we're helping people, it's not about just going out and checking boxes and saying, I talked to this person, that person, that person. It's about changing lives. It's about, I have a product. I have something that can help you. I've been put in a situation. I have a resource that can help you. Or if I went to church, I have something that can bless you. It can change your life. So you have to understand where we are in these circles. We come outside of them, we connect, right? And we make ourselves stronger and we build a frontier. So that 7th grade situation, it made me like, I was nervous, but I remember what my mom did. And this was so unique about what my mom did. My mom connected with so many people. She built relationships, and those relationships changed my life. When I graduated from high school, I didn't have a scholarship. My mom worked at Dairy Queen. My dad was a construction worker. He was in a union. He was working sometimes. He wasn't working sometimes. So we didn't have a whole lot of money. So when people I was around talked about their dream, that dream was different from what I had because I felt I didn't have the resources. But I was rich because my mom had an asset that changed lives that helped me change my life. So what happened was, we were sitting there. My mom worked at Dairy Queen, and she used to always talk about her baby. My baby's graduating, talking about me and my grades and all this. And the manager of the Dairy Queen, not the manager, the regional manager of the Dairy Queen happened to be an Aggie, heard my mom's story, right? And said, hey, your son's graduating from Texas, from Bastrop. She said, yes, let me take him down to Texas A&M, right? So I went to Texas A&M with him. My mom had already told my story. He introduced me to his friends. His friends happened to be in administration. They happen to have access to money. And they start saying, oh, we have this scholarship that's available for you. You're in the top 10%. I'm like, yeah. Now here it is. I had good grades, but didn't have the connections or the resources or the information to connect with those good grades, right? But my mom, using her skill set, connecting circles, connecting circles, connecting circles, connecting circles, connected one circle of administration to another circle of a child working at Dairy Queen. And now all of a sudden, connecting circles, I leave from that meeting with a full ride to Texas A&M. Woo! And here it is, coming from an aspect of not having money, not having those things, but had a mom that understood who she was, understood her gift, and worked her gift. Expand the circle, expand the circle, expand the circle, bam. So she did that, and I was like, wow, it changed my life because she was doing what she was supposed to do, understanding who she was, and using, because we would always say this, my mom was a great communicator, an asset-based communication developer, she knew the assets, connected them, moved on. Maybe didn't know it, but that's what she did. So my circle, the people I were around, I saw those skill sets, and those skill sets got in me. There was a mentorship going on. I'm sitting there, I didn't know it was happening, but the more time I spent in my circle, the more time they developed me, allowed me to go outside of my circle. You got it? Y'all getting me? The administrator went outside of his, I'm going outside of mine. And as we're going outside of ours, we are building change agents, right? My grandfather was the same type of person, right? He would go sit down with people, like I done told you, sit a spell. They would talk all day. I'm like, Grandpa, how long is a spell? We've been here all day. I got things to do. How many of you have been in life and you move past the conversation, you move past the appreciative inquiry to the point of saying, I have something to do. And because you didn't appreciate the first part of that conversation, the things that you want to do down the line don't happen because you don't have a relationship. I didn't understand that. My grandfather was sitting there talking. I'm a kid saying, can we move on? I didn't understand that he was building a foundation for me later on that I can build on because of the relationship that he built early. So when I came back to a community, they're going to say, oh, you are the grandson, talking Giddings, right? That Giddings language. You are the grandson of Henry McDonald. Who are your folks? Who are your folks? Who are your folks? So what happened was my grandfather was building relationship, building trust for me while he was mentoring me, right? So I'm seeing it. Can I flash? I flash back, now I'm gonna move back forward. Can we do that? Sitting in a class, right? 7th grade, boys going out, feeling like, oh, I can't do this. Then I began to remember those stories. Oh, my grandfather told me this. My grandfather showed me by his conduct how to relate to people from many different backgrounds. My mom sold Avon. So now I'm like, oh, okay, this is who I am. And I'll tell you, I had some people in leadership that told me, hey, you can't go to Texas A&M. Maybe you need to go to a junior college, maybe this, and that. But I also had people in my circle that spoke a different word, that began to say, this is where you can go. This is how I'm going to help you. That guy who left his circle, took me up to Texas A&M, invested in me. He was the one that began to tell me about Savash these horns off. He asked me a question, what do you want to do with your life? And I knew how to answer it. Oh, I want to be this, and this. He said, go to fish camp. Fish camp? What is fish camp? I didn't know. Well, fish camp was this thing at Texas A&M where they take in all the freshmen before they come on campus. They take them out to the woods. I forgot the Palestine, right? And they go out there and they have this thing where they bring all the people together, right? So he decided to help me go to Texas A&M and all those different things. So I went to this thing called fish camp. Now, this was unique because when I walked out there, guess what? It was a bunch of people, but there were not a lot of people who looked like me. And I'm like, they're going, giggle, howdy, whoop. That wasn't part of my environment. I hadn't seen that, but I understood something. Get in a relationship, learn. And then I began to say, I'm unique. That's what my son would say. My son says he's different, though. I was talking to him. He said, Dad, I'm different. Now, when he says he's different, I love it because he's saying most people fall to this. Most people can't succeed. And then he looked at me and said, Dad, I'm different. That means I can change this thing. I was like, whoa, I like that word, son. But I saw something being passed on. Now, going back to Texas A&M fish camp. So I'm sitting there and I'm going on the bus, get off the bus, and I look, and it could be intimidating because no one looks like me. We're in the woods, and they're singing a bunch of crazy songs, right? But then I thought about it. Oh, opportunity. No one looks like me. That means I stand out, that I'm different, that I'm unique. So therefore, people are going to know who I am. Now, if I bring a good message, if I bring a good report, then folks will be like, oh, I remember Ronnie. Who's Ronnie? Oh, that was that African-American guy. How many? I was number one of them, but do you remember him? Yeah. What was his name? Ronnie McDonald. Ronald McDonald. No, Ronnie McDonald. Oh, yeah, I remember him. He was that energetic guy. So now, rather than the situation being set up to be bad, now it is set up to be good. So when I walk in there, whoop, giggle, howdy, getting to meet people, these Yale leaders come in and they start leading all these yells and all that stuff. I'm introduced to my future. Oh, yeah, do you get it? I'm introduced to my future because eventually I'm going to become a whoop, but I'm introduced to it. Now here it is. I can walk away from it and say these people are not like me, or I can walk into it and say, oh, we're about to take it to the whole another level. They've never had an African-American Yale leader. They've never had an African-American non-reg Yale leader. We're about to take it to another level. We're about to be a change agent. Oh, wow, how did that happen? Expanding circles. So therefore, when we get in, I'm learning the yells and doing all these different things. But this is a moment that I remember as time is getting short. I know. This is a moment that I remember that we had this deal when they turned off all the lights, right? And they put this candle in the middle of the floor or whatever. I said, oh, man, uh-oh, is this a seance or what's happening here? But they put a candle in the middle of the floor and they began to ask us questions about how you felt about Texas A&M, what insecurities that you have, all these different things. And as we began to talk, you couldn't see any faces. All you heard was voices. And the voices were similar in their concerns, right? So then when you turn the lights back on, you had big football players that were nervous. You had all these different people. We all had common fears, right? But it showed that when we work together, we can conquer those fears because we form these little discussion groups or DGs, and I would call them circles that would be with you throughout your college years. So they put a group around you that you can talk to help you move through situations. And what happened was the more diverse your group was, the more tools you had to deal with your situations, right? I knew somebody from here, from there, from there, from there. Oh, who's that? Oh, that's that African American. Oh, let me pull in all these different resources, these assets that we can bring to the table because we expanded our circles. Are you getting me? Are you with me? All right, all right, all right. So went through that. It was a life-changing experience. Fish camp helped change my life. Now here it is. Now I got to say, how am I going to go to the next level? I want to be a Yale leader. Woo! There had never been an African-American Yale leader. There had only been a few non-reg Yale leaders, right? Non-reg means not in the Corps, not in the military branch or anything like that. So I wasn't any of those, right? But I learned something that I learned at fish camp. I used something I learned at fish camp. When I was running for Yale leader, which is an actual election, most of the people were in the Corps. They wore the uniforms, they had tradition, and all those different things. I was this kid that didn't have a uniform on, and I was running for, and I was the only African American. But I came back to this point. What makes me unique? My name is Ronnie McDonald. Oh, I'm going to use that. And then I have a personality. I'm going to use that. So I began to say, not focusing on the things that made me stick out, but the things that made, in a bad way, but the things that made me unique. Why settle for small fries when you can have a Big Mac? You deserve a break today. Vote for Ronnie McDonald. If McDonald's is going to put out all their money on advertising, I'm going to use it. So we began to go out and we united people. Building bridges, uniting people was a theme. And we got all these people together and we won the election by expanding our circle, right? Now, fast forwarding. How do you take this principle of expanding the circle outside of high school, outside of college, to the real world? I grew up rural, went to Texas A&M, was a Yale leader. I learned all the Aggie stuff. Whoop, gig 'em, howdy. Knew how to work a room, knew how to do all that stuff, learn politics and all those things. But I came back to Bastrop to run for county judge, right? And there had never been an African-American county judge, and there surely hadn't been a 27-year-old county judge. So when I began to walk out, people started saying, boy, you're too young, you're still wet behind the ears and all those different things. But I remember something. Can we sit a spell? I remember walking around with my grandfather, part of my circle group, that was spending time with people, talking to them. And I went out, and I would say I didn't understand this at first because I was political. I wanted to see how I could go in a room and say, hey, there are 20 people. I spend 2 minutes talking to them. I get out, I move, boom, all the statistics. But when I went to my first group and I was getting ready, I said 2 minutes, I'm going to move on. I shook the person saying, you know what they told me? What they asked me? Help me out, Mary. What they asked me?
Can we sit a spell?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. I was like, y'all know what I'm talking. That's going to take too much time, right? I don't have time to sit a spell. That's going to take too much time. And how many times in our projects we move past building a relationship because we want to get the project done, and we don't understand getting the project done and it having stability is the point of building a relationship that goes beyond us. My grandfather, because he sat a spell, built a relationship that went beyond him. So now myself being 27, trained in all the Aggie stuff, doing all those different things, can connect energy to relationship, and then we can move communities, right? Because a lot of times energy, young people, they have all the skills, but they're not connected to the relationship. So therefore people say, who's this person from Florida? We ain't got time for somebody from Florida. But the point of someone from Florida has an asset that can help the community, but we have to build a relationship to be able to move it forward. And going back to the story, the guy who gave me the job had an asset. My mom connected the relationship, right? As I went and ran out for Yale leader, relationships gave me assets. So I'm going back, running for county judge, 27 years old. They saying I didn't have enough experience. But as I began to sit a spell, I began to, do this thing called appreciative inquiry. I talk, I'm asking the question, I'm hearing, I'm writing down assets. Oh, that person have that asset, they can do this, they can do that. Oh, I listened to them, I wrote down the asset. Now I'm gonna do some asset-based community development. I'm gonna start connecting this asset with that asset with that asset. And now we're gonna move forward. So therefore, I met a guy named Mike Fisher. Mike Fisher, his whole thing has been fire. Firefighter, 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 rule of fire. I didn't know anything about a firefighter. What do you mean? A bow tie and a suit talking about fire? What are you, boy, you're not country enough. But when I walked in a room and I had Mike Fisher beside me, oh, I'm golden. Woo! And then every community, as you build those relationships and you go and you see people and they have assets. But I'm going to go back to my story. A lot of times, if you don't feel heard, if you don't feel that you're a part of the room, you don't bring your asset. But if I can feel part of the room, I can feel my value. My voice is not going to squeak. My voice is going to be clear, and I'm going to speak with confidence, and I'm going to say, howdy, all that good stuff, because somebody gave me a voice. They appreciated me. So the same thing happens as we began to build these relationships. I built a relationship with Mike Fisher. We came up with our first emergency management department, built it up. And then when we faced the largest fire in the state of Texas, it wasn't about a guy with a bow tie that can lead some yells. It was about relationships that were being built to help build a foundation that was able to deal with disaster based on sitting the spell, right? So throughout the time, 27 years old, well, let me tell you, I went out, met people, I got elected. And as I got elected, I remembered those resources that were going to help me be successful, because I can't do it by myself. My circle had to expand. I had to have people speaking into my ear, telling me that I could do it, but also with people with skill sets to be able to do it as one team. And then we show a picture that people can't break down. Oh, you're not old enough. I got Mike Fisher. Well, you're not bilingual. I got Mr. Martinez. You're not smooth enough. I got the computer X. All of these different assets are around me that make me. And you know what's so cool about it? I don't have them just because I want to be diverse. I have them because they are my friends. We built a relationship. So therefore, when we're able to go through the fire, I like that. Go through the fire, I have people with me that are ready to go through it with me. They can say, hey, Mike Fisher told me, hey, I support the brand. I'm scared. This is the largest fire in the state of Texas. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I look at Mike Fisher. He said, let's go. And I'm like, let's go. Because you have people around you that are ready to move forward. And that's what it called being a change agent. It's not you by yourself. It's about including or expanding your circle through relationship building, taking the time to really find out who a person is. I'm coming to a conclusion. I ask you, what did you see when you first saw me, right? And a lot of times we only see what we've experienced, right? So, hey, he's an African-American male. He's probably this, that. So you are forming an opinion based on the surface, not on the depth of conversation. So as we've talked a little bit, now you'll say, wait a minute, I know a little bit more about him through his story. So I moved past just being a guy, whatever you put on your paper, right? The resume, we write that to be cool, but that's not the person, right? I want to put all that stuff up there and say, yeah, let's get him to speak because he's done some things. That's not who I am. But as you have conversation with me, you can start saying, oh, he's passionate. He's this, he's that. Because you spent some time with me, almost an hour. You spent time. So it moves past the stereotypes. My wife and I, we went to have food in this Asian restaurant, right? And the owner came to us and he was talking to us. Great guy. He was trying to establish a relationship with us. But we could tell he hadn't really experienced it because when he first came in, he said, I was with my wife. My wife is a beautiful woman. But she said, hey, yeah, your wife, she looks like Beyonce. I said, oh, okay, all right. Who's Beyonce? I don't know. And then my son came back and went the next day. Son has a little twist. He looks like somebody named Wayne. What is that? Oh, that's a rapper. He said, nah. Oh, yeah, but you know, all rappers become athletes anyway, right? So he threw 2 or 3 offensive statements right back to back, right? But you know what was so funny? Because we had been through life, we knew that he wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He just hadn't experienced a relationship. You know what I'm saying? So we still go there, we still eat, and now we're going to grow that relationship to move past those stereotypes. And a lot of times, because we have limited experience with people, we give broad stereotypes, right? So as a 27-year-old county judge, I heard it all. Every time you come, hey, you're asking me about sports and football or this and that, or do you know this rapper, or do you know this? No, I don't know every black rapper. No, I don't know every black singer. But we can build a relationship and we can begin to deal with. Did I go meet? Can y'all hear me?
Hear you. We can hear you. You're good.
Oh, okay. So through relationship, we move beyond those stereotypes. And we're able to talk about things that are important to us, and we expand our circle. And as we expand our circle, we expand our resources, and we expand the ability to connect and help people. That's all we do. We are public servants. Our whole deal is to help people. We're given information to help change lives. And we change lives by getting to know the people we serve. Now, I think I'm at 12:55, so I'm pretty close to the question and answer. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I actually have a question on that kind of that direction that you were ending on there too, is how do you know what you're missing in your circle until you hit that wall of that experience that puts you in that evaluation mode? How do you know what you need, what else you can bring into your circle, and being humble enough to recognize that that missing factor?
Well, I think it's a process of living life. You're going to be put in situations, and I think every time you go out, my kids get mad at me because I talk to everybody, you know. But when I'm talking to everybody, there's a chance of connectivity, right? To be able to say, oh, this person has this, because sometimes I can say I need this, I need that, but the person that I really need is right beside me, but I never take the time to talk to them, right? So I know we want to go and say, I need a doctor, I need a lawyer, I need a farmer, I need a this, I need a that. But in reality, people have skills that we don't even know about. And as we get to know them, they are the ones that are going to open doors to the community that we don't know, right? It's the person at Walmart that's saying, hey, how you doing today? That is going to be the person that is going to help unlock doors that you haven't been to. You understand what I'm saying? So to answer your question, I don't think I can give you the prescribed answer, and you need a person from this background, that background, you need this and that. When I was in leadership, everybody always wanted me to be the black guy. You know what I'm saying? So anytime they did a meeting, if they needed black representation, they'll say, oh, let's get Judge McDonald, right? Now, I'm almost 50 years old. Now, there were probably a lot more young people who have more experience, but I was the comfortable one that they reached out to, right? So every time I go to a community, I see the same people as we're trying to diversify, but I'm saying there are so many untapped people that you hadn't got to because we are comfortable. And all of us have lists. We have a list of saying, well, let's talk to this person, that person, that person, that person. It's the same list, but it's not expanding. But when you start saying, I want to go talk to the everyday person, I'm going to go in communities that I've never been in before. I'm going to go outside of my community to meet different people, right? And as I do that, they're going to open doors to other individuals. So it's not just saying, the easy thing is I'm going to get the local pastor. That's the easy thing, right? And then what happens is, I'm just be honest, I get so used to being the local pastor, I got all the information. You can't come to the neighborhood but through me, right? And that's not true. There are so many people with valuable information that we're not tapping into because we are giving people things because of titles. I'm listening to my son, and my son's like, man, that just motivated me. But I had to really take time to hear what he was saying, right? Rather than say, boy, sit down, be quiet. Let me listen to the uniqueness that you bring. My mom was working at Dairy Queen. Nobody would have put her on a list and told her to sit in a meeting, but she was one of the best communicators out there. But it was just the opportunity to sit and say, oh, so now every time I go somewhere, I'm looking for an opportunity to be able to say, that's an asset for me. You know, that's gonna broaden me. Did that answer your question, Mary?
Yes, it did. And I think that also relates to your leadership style too. And, for our master naturalists and our chapters who are working in these communities of conservation and building their asset circles, also recognizing as leaders within their communities that sometimes not being the expert of it all and having these assets that are the experts and giving them the platforms to become the leaders or to become the spearheads for those circles and expanding the circles for them. I think that's important, that humility in it all, of not being the only person. When you reached out to Mike Fisher to say, I need you to play head for this, and kind of letting others expand the circle for you.
And Mary, that is it. Because in politics, sometimes people organize against you just because you're in a spot. So sometimes it's better for the message to come from somebody else, because if it was coming from me, it would be deemed political. But when it's coming from a youth saying, hey, I want parks and recreation, right? Now that may be on my list, but if I said it, it looks political. But if the youth says it, it's like, oh, that's a great idea. Then I get behind them and let them push it. And the biggest thing about it is, because it's their project, they're going to push it harder than me. I'm now the resource that is helping push that, because if I'm passionate, you say, hey, Ronnie, go talk about it, and I'm gonna go on that. If they feel that they're at the table and they're being heard, then they're going to push it at another level. And then they can go pull in people from their community. I'm realizing now, I used to think I was a young guy, but I'm not anymore. So therefore, I need young people who are passionate, connected to me, to be able to help move forward. Classic example, Stony Point. Stony Point was you know where Stony Point is, maybe you don't, but it was almost like a colonia in our area. And it was always looking for help. We had a guy that had been pioneering there for a long time, but he was getting tired, right? Because nothing wasn't happening. Then a young group of people coming like, I'm excited. But what needed to happen was a conversation to hear some of the wisdom with the energy to be able to move a community forward. Because a lot of times the wisdom gets tired, quits. The energy comes and doesn't have the wisdom. But when you can bring it together and resources, that's how you move a community.
That kind of relates there. We've got a question in the Q&A from Christy Kerr Leonard. She's a master naturalist up in our North Texas, Dallas area chapter. She said she's working on a project in a food desert called Widen, and she's having trouble finding a community leader to work with the master naturalists that want to work to conserve. They're working on conserving some trails, but how do you find those youth, that energy, those community leaders that can help to make those connections when you don't have the connections to make those relationships to move energy forward?
Well, I think a lot of times we always come to communities asking rather than coming to communities just observing. And what I mean by that is appreciating what they do, right? So if they're having things, I'm just appreciating what they're doing. I'm not asking, can you help me this, and that? And then once I build a relationship, find out a little bit more about them, then I'm able to work with them. You know what I'm saying? Because so many times in government or in agriculture, we're coming saying, hey, I got this project, I need to find leaders. But there are things happening in that community every day that we're not attending, right? So finding out what's going on in that community, attending, not even asking for anything. That's the part of building a relationship. Just sitting and saying, okay, they got this going on. They got that going on. I'm just going to sit. I'm going to visit. I know this is tough. I'm just going to go sit in somebody's church and I'm not going to ask to speak. Right? I'm going to sit in somebody's meeting. I'm not going to ask to do this. I want to sit there and find out what's going on. My mom, before she sold the product, built a relationship. And then once she built a relationship, then there was opportunity not to sell it, but to help people. So what I'm saying is sitting. I had a commissioner ask me one time, and it was so funny. He said, hey, Judge, how do I get Black people out to the polls, right? And the point I was saying, it ain't about that. It's basically, how do you build relationship? And if you're going and you're visible and you're doing things in the community, then all of a sudden they're going to say, hey, man, then you can move forward. So it's the sitting a spell mentality that says I'm building the relationship. So for example, I was taken to Texas A&M. I sat and I learned, then I was like, whoop, gig 'em, howdy, boom, boom, boom. And then I said, as a Yale leader, how can I go out more into African American communities, right? And do different things. Now I'm already there, but now I can introduce Texas A&M in a different way, right? It's not going to be a university where there are no African Americans. This going on. This now we can close our eyes and think, oh, everybody loves Texas A&M. Woo! No, sometimes you have to explain it in a way in which individuals can connect to it and say, oh, I get something out of that. Sometimes we have to explain our projects in a way where people can connect. Oh, I can get something out of that. That makes sense to me. And building that relationship does that, because it's like just like when I was a judge, the same people came to court all the time, right? All of them had their little projects, but when somebody new came in, it was like, man, who's that person there? What's going on, right? Same thing in our communities. When you start visiting communities, they're gonna say, wait, who's this new person? What is their interest? What is so I began, even when I was judge, I took my meetings outside of the courthouse and took them into the communities and said, hey, we want to do this meeting. Can we sponsor it at your church, at your building, at your community center? And all we want you to do is invite some friends. Or can we just sit a spell? We're going to bring some food. And then once you start doing that, we were saying, I care about your community. I'm not just coming asking. Or I'm not saying, oh, we have all these meetings and nobody never show up to our meetings, right? You're going to tell me to go into your English class where I'm the only African American feeling judged, my voice going out. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how our and that's what we heard last month from Alex Bailey. He was talking about sit a spell, but not with those words, about going in and listening first and creating conversations and building those relationships. Before you push an action or push a request or a product or things like that, it's all about that relationship and not assuming that you have things that they need. It's coming into a conversation with a project, not saying I have the solution for you or you need this from me. It's let's see where we're at with this relationship first.
And I think it's real because I'm enriched by being introduced to different cultures, right? When I worked at Texas A&M in Extension, it was new for me, right? I went from politics to the aspect of administration, education, agriculture, right? So it was a different thing, but it made me grow. And every time you're introduced into a different community, it's going to expand you. And when I'm talking to my son, it expands me. They're not thinking the same way I thought when I was that age. And now for me to go out and speak to kids, I have some wisdom, but I have to be able to put it in a shell in which they can understand it. And I get that through relationships. And every time you go out, we grow by being exposed to people with different resources. And I think it's important too, as leaders, to speak to individuals' leadership, because sometimes people may not even know that they're leaders. Like I said, my mom was a great communicator. I don't think anybody ever spoke to her and said, this is who you are. This is what I see in you, because she was doing it all the time. I would have felt that I would have to do this to be successful. Who would ever thought me just loving people can help me get elected, right? But somebody had to speak to me and see something in me and say, oh, I'm going to take you to Texas A&M. Oh, then all that stuff. So in communities, we have all these resources that are not being spoken to in a way in which they can say, oh, man, there's something great here, and we're going to build on it. We're going to use what's in our hand.
I think that's fantastic. We are at 8 minutes past the hour. I do want to give just a little bit of time if there's any time for questions. Michelle, I have not been watching chat. Have you been able to see if there's any questions?
We don't have additional questions yet, but those of you who have questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. And we can take probably a final question if there are any.
I did see Wesley Reeves mentioned, he said, I didn't have time for today, but I am glad I chose to sit a spell.
And you know what's so unique about sitting a spell? I think later on, I laugh because I value that time when I was young more now than I did then, because I could see the importance of it, of really seeing people's wealth that they have through personality, through assets. They can really benefit communities. because I did, be honest, I saw politics, and politics is more about numbers than about relationships. We form relationships to get numbers rather than relationships to benefit lives.
So we have a question that came in for you in the chat, Ronnie. Do you see it possible to establish and widen one circle without putting one's personal life all out there? I appreciate keeping my personal life personal and separate from work and networking. I noticed that not all organizations function the same way.
Yeah, I think the point about listening, and that's not the point of me talking, but it's the aspect of listening, getting in those relationships. And I couldn't talk to everybody. Some people are natural talkers, right? But once I found that asset to be able to put them in a place where they can flourish, right? So sometimes it's forming a team with many different parts, and maybe that part that is more relational is one that is a part of your team, because you don't want to force things that you're not comfortable with. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So it's the point of realizing I had a lady that was a great financial person, right? She loved numbers, but she didn't love being around people. So my deal was to be able to connect her in situations in which she could be successful with my personality, to with somebody that we can both benefit from. You understand? Sometimes we're just a bridge, and being that bridge does not mean I have to do all the work, but I can recognize talent in people. I can recognize potential and put those pieces together. So then I'm really doing asset-based community development without me doing it all. Because everybody is not one that, my wife is not that. She does not like to talk to a lot of people. She has a lot of assets. Hers is more the written aspect. So we work together to do the work that we do.
I think that's great. You've got lots of kudos coming in the chat. So if there's not any other questions, I do want to let you get on with your day. I just want to say thank you for sitting a spell with us, Ronnie, and for taking the time to talk to our master naturalists, building these communities and conservation communities specifically within the Master Naturalist Program, recognizing our circles and the assets and within the communities and others. I think that's so important to continue forward with any sort of organization like ours, and building on to kind of our growing mission of just sharing conservation messaging and the appreciation for the outdoors and respect for the ecosystems that we live in. I think that's just part of our messaging that we can get across to everybody's circle, for sure.
And you know what? One more thing.
Please.
So I think a picture of our circle should represent the diversity of a community. So if you see my friend set, you should be able to see so many different aspects of a community, young, old. And that right there is going to make me a stronger person based on the people that are connected to me. Because I've had so many individuals try to take shots of saying what I don't have. And sometimes you can get to a point where you feel bad. But when you recognize your circle, the people you're connected to, you have everything you need. And I've realized that through my life. But I had to take time to appreciate the people that were with me and the gift that they brought, and to just really cherish it. So I would like for people, if they ever look at me, they'll be able to see, oh man, he has friends from all different backgrounds, and you cannot nail me down and say he's just that, so.
I think that's great. Michelle, do you have any closing thoughts or questions? Putting you on the spot a little. Sorry.
No, just thank you again, Ronnie, for speaking to another group that I'm working with. And I guess the final, I guess, closing questions would be, and you don't have to spend like the rest say these on webinar, but if you have additional questions like our members, our groups, our chapters should be thinking about and asking themselves, their group within the community, let us know those.
Okay. Okay. I will. I think that the work that you do is so beneficial to communities. It gives information, it connects. And I think a lot of times because we don't know, we don't do. So the more information that communities have is going to be a benefit. So I'll think about those questions.
Excellent. Well, for everybody who's still with us, thank you guys so much. I know a few folks had to jump off right at that lunch hour, but we have recorded today's session for our Texas Master Naturalist Be the Change webinar with Ronnie McDonald. Thank you again so much for sitting a spell with us and taking the time today to talk to our Master Naturalists. For everybody else, thank you guys again for joining us. We'll have the recording up either later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning on our website. And we'll see you guys next month. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Really
I enjoyed it. Thank you. Hey, y'all have a great day.